Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of my Python tutorial series. My name is Eliaza, and you are watching EA Lego Academy. Now, to take us further in our tutorial series, in our last class, we looked at the file dialog project, whereby we talked about the ask open file and the ask save as file, which allows us to access files on our operating system, such as reading from them or writing to them. Then we looked at the message box widget, which allows us to display a window screen or a pop-up dialog that displays the message to us, the user. And then we looked at window, the pained window, which allows us to display widgets in either a vertical manner or a horizontal manner. So we can also use them as backgrounds for widgets on a window screen. So now to take us further in this tutorial, we are going to be looking at binding functions and how we can change the icon on our window screen. So binding functions, before we proceed writing code, I'll just briefly explain what they are. So binding functions are functions that allow us to perform an operation once we interact with our window screen, or they are functions that allow us to perform operations once we interact with our window screen using a mouse and the keyboard. So they allow us to perform operations when we interact with our window screen using a mouse and a keyboard. So that's basically what they are. So applications of them, we used back in the day before we created frameworks for games such as Unity, Unreal Engine, like GDX for Java development, Unity for C Sharp, and then Unreal Engine for the C++ programming language. So back in the day, before these game engines were developed or created, we used binding functions. So binding functions are properties that now every programming language that is created comes with a graphical user interface. Every single programming language. So with Python, it is the tkinter module. With Java, it is the swing module, and we have some other modules for other programming languages. So back in the day, before frameworks were developed, because the development of a framework is based on the arrangement of or structured information of algorithms written together. So every framework that has been created either for game design or for application development is just a series of complex rules written together with algorithms. So an algorithm is a combination of a conditional statements, a loop, and data structures. So basically, when we say an algorithm, it's just a combination of conditional statements and loops. So manipulated together in order to execute a program. So along the line, once I'm done with this tutorial, I'm still going to treat some other intricate concepts in regards to programming. So there's a general principle involved in programming, which I'll still explain more. But to focus on what we are treating today, the binding function, we used binding functions back in the day to create games, because when a user clicks on a keyboard, an action is performed. Once he moves his mouse, an action is performed, such as moving the character or firing a projectile. It depends on the genre of the game that is being created or that the user is trying to develop. So binding functions was a way we could create games back in the day before frameworks were created. So we want to see how we can be able to use them, just an overview of how they work, not like we are developing any game. But subsequently in my other tutorial series, which I will be creating later, I will do game development, game design, and some other principles. So yeah, as the name implies, this is EA technology, and my core objective is building knowledge and technological solutions from the ground up. So I don't shy away from first principles. It's very important. This is how you can be able to develop any software that solves a problem or any complex system that addresses a particular need. So I don't shy away. So if you are not really following my tutorials, I started from the basics in this my tutorial series, Python. I started from the installation and I showed you how code is written together from the very foundation and how it is built upon to start creating systems, complex systems. So we're still going to progress, but that is the core idea of my tutorial series. And I'm not just centering around a single programming language. I will touch a few other programming languages along the line. But that's the concept of binding functions. And then the next thing we're going to look at is icon photo. So the icon photo is a function that allows us to be able to replace the icon on our window screen. So you will notice that once I run this my program from the last tutorial, this was the pane window we talked about. If you look at the top left, you will see that there's an icon there. So that's the default tkinter icon. It looks like a leaf. So we are going to see how we can replace this. So we're going to see how we can replace this. So there's a modus operandi in which I follow. That is what I'm going to use as well. So without further ado, let's get started. Now the first thing we want to look at is how we can be able to use our binding function, such as entering our window screen and leaving the window screen. So I'll just call it enter and leave bind. So enter and leave bind. So basically what's going to happen here is that I'm going to create a window screen that would detect movement, or that will detect location and movement on our mouse on it. So it's going to record the exact location that mouse was on the window screen. So as usual, the first thing you want to do is to import tkinter. I'll say import tkinter. The next thing I want to do is to create my window screen. I'll say tkinter.tk. Then after that, say window.title, and I will just say enter and leave. So I want to use, so just as the name implies, that is going to be the name. Like these are the names of the binding functions that we are going to try to access, or we are going to attempt to access. Now, binding functions are inside every class. They are in the TK class and they are in every single class, such as your buttons, your labels, just name it. So they allow us to detect, use our mouse and keyboard to be able to perform an operation once that mouse or keyboard is clicked. So when we interact with our keyboard and our mouse, we perform an operation using the binding function. So that is just the principle and the concept behind binding functions. Now what I'm going to do is to create a function that is going to be called using a binding function. So I'll call this one enter. So enter. Now it's not a must you must print out the location of where your mouse is on your window screen. You can decide to call another function that maybe print out a dictionary, print out a sentence. All we are trying to say is that that binding function that you are using is the one that is going to execute that function, the user defined function that you created. That is just all what we are trying to say. So I can create a variable, I can call it event, and now this variable is needed because now we have x and y axis on our window screen. We have that, but we need a variable to be able to identify the x and then the y axis. So that's what we need. So that's the reason why I'm passing a parameter in the parentheses of this function. Now this parameter can be anything. You can decide to give it any name you want it to have, but I'm giving it event. So I'll just come here and print out some sentence once my mouse enters that location on my window screen. So I'll just say entered at x is equal to, so I can just open a curly bracket. I'll say event dot x. So this x is inbuilt. but we need the parameter to be able to get the actual location, and y is equal to event dot y. So this will allow us to get the x and y axis. Then I'll create another function that allows me to leave. That is going to record the exact location I left the window screen at. So I'm going to create a lot of binding functions here on this window screen. So I'm going to create for detecting the location when I enter and leave the window screen. I'm going to create a binding function such that when I left click, it records the event that I'm left clicking. And in our previous tutorials, we already treated binding functions when I talked about drawing on the canvas. If you can still remember, so we used B1 motion. So B1 refers to when you left click on your mouse, B2 when you middle click for those of us who use external mouses or an external mouse. Sorry about that. So for those of us that use an external mouse, when you middle click, that is your B2, and then when you right click, that is your B3. Now for your B1 motion, when you left click and you drag, you left click, you hold it down, and then you move your mouse across to create some strokes. That is what we use, or that is what we call B1 motion, or it's the B1 motion that allows us to identify when we do that. So when you left click, you hold and you drag, it's your B1 motion that identifies that. So to save myself the stress, I'll just copy this code. The whole purpose of a programmer is efficiency, not redundancy. So I'll come here and say left at. So I left at this position. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to be able to create functions that recognize when or identify when I left click, when I middle click, and when I right click. I'll just come here and say left click. I'll also pass a parameter there, event. I'll come here and I'll just um, print out something. Or print you have left click. So just a very simple sentence. And the next thing, I'll create a function that says right. Now there's no need for this event anyway. There's no need for the event. So that event was needed to identify the X and Y position. So right click. So you can just come here and say you have the print, you have right clicked, and then the next thing I'll say middle click. So I'll come here, print out the sentence. You have middle clicked. All right. So now after that, I'll need to also create a function that allows me to identify when I am clicking on a key, when I'm clicking on a keyboard, or when I'm clicking on any key on my keyboard, basically. So I'll just come here and I'll just call it key pressed. So pressed, key pressed. So I'm about to start my work today, so I have to rush. So my my job description starts by 9, so I have to quickly do this tutorial before I start. So that's why I'm rushing in a way. So I'll just come here and say print. Now also this one needs an event. So every time you are trying to get the x and y axis and you are trying to identify when the key is pressed, you also have to pass the parameter in the parentheses to identify that key that is being pressed. And similar to how we have the x and y identifying the axis or the coordinates on my window screen, in order to identify a key being pressed, we have an inbuilt keyword called char. So char is just similar to your x and y such that it is inbuilt. Just like how x and y identifies coordinates, the char allows us to identify keys pressed on our keyboard. And of course, you also need this parameter passed in the parentheses of the function to be able to identify that key pressed. So I'll come here and I'll just say key event dot char. pressed. That's what I'll do. Now, because everything is on my window screen, I'm performing every single thing on the window screen. So I have to come here and I'll call my window screen. I'll say window.bind. That's the first thing I'll do. I'll bind the first function. So the first thing I want to do is enter. This is how you write your binding function. You write it in, you open a greater than and then a less than within quotation marks, and then the function you are trying to call, you're going to pass that function beside it. Now, when you are passing a function to a binding, or when you are using a binding function to call a function, you don't want to pass the parentheses of that function. You want to just leave it how it is. Come here, you say leave. Then the next stage, say window dot bind. Now this one is going to be my B1. I'll say button 1. This is how you write it. I'll just say left click. So I'll just copy it to save myself the stress. Expected type. Okay. So we need an event here. We need an event so that to work. So it was not going to work if I didn't pass the event. So I think I'll do that for all of them so that it will not give us an error. So it needs that event. Since we are trying to use a binding function or attach it to a binding function, the event is needed. So I'll just copy them, save myself the stress, copy the code and paste it a few times. So left click, I come here, I'll say right click, and I'll say middle, to click, and after that I'll just come here and say key pressed to identify the key pressed. Okay, so let us now run the main loop. I'll say window dot main loop. So window dot main loop. So let's see what we're going to have. Okay. So if I enter my window screen, you see that it records and tells me exactly where I entered. Now if I should leave, see, it tells me exactly where I left. If I should enter again, it tells me where I entered. If I should leave, it tells me I left at. Now, if I should left click, you see, it tells me, okay, so I was expected to do the left clicking actually. So let's remove that key press. We will do it in another program. So um what I'll do, I'll comment this one out so that to not give us problems. So I think I just passed the same. That was the error I made. So right click is button 3. Sorry about that. Middle click is button 2, and then to be able to identify my key pressed, I will say key. Just key, that's all. So let's try to run the program again so that we will not have any errors. So that was my bad. If I enter the window screen, it tells me where I entered. If I leave, it tells me where I left at. If I come here again, if I left click, it tells me you have left clicked. If I right click, it tells me I have right clicked. So I don't have an external mouse, so let me quickly connect that so that I can show you that when you middle click, it tells you you have middle clicked. So I'll quickly connect that. So I'll connect. So when I middle click, it tells me I have middle clicked. And so now the next one, if I should click on a button, a key, it tells me what I've pressed. So I'm clicking so many keys and it's telling me the key that I have pressed. So that's basically how you can create a binding function. This is just a basic representation of how you can use a binding function. And of course, its application is in game development. At least that is what has come to my mind as of now. So it might have so many other types of applications, but the one that I'm conversant with, the application that I'm conversant with is game development. All right, so that's how you can work with binding functions. Now, the next thing we want to look at is icon photo, how you can change the icon of a window screen. So I can just come here and I'll just call it icon photo widget. Icon photo widget. So now the first thing you want to do is to import tkinter. After that, you want to create a window screen. So since I'm not placing anything on the window screen, we don't have to waste time. Just go straight to the point. I'll come here, I'll say window.title, and I'll just say change icon, come down here, say window.geometry. I'll give it 300 by 400. After that, I will just come here, create a variable photo. Now we have a class called photo image. So the photo image class allows us to get the location of the icon that we are trying to use to replace our normal leaf icon in our program. So I'll run it again first before I change it, call it main loop. Let us run and see how the icon looks like. So you see that we have a leaf icon. So we're trying to change that icon to be something else of our choice. Now, there's a parameter called file. Now this file allows us to get the path of the image we are trying to use. So I have already downloaded an image. You can download any image of your choice, but let the image be of the PNG format. So I've downloaded an image called bank. I think I already downloaded it some time back, and even search for it so that just to be sure. So bank. So okay, I have an image bank.png which I am going to use. So I'll just come here and get the absolute path. Now, in order to get your absolute path of a file located in your system, you you open up your PowerShell or your command line interface, and you will discover that you have your C drive, your C directory, the users, and user. So for most operating systems, most window operating systems, the after the just after the name you see here before this greater than symbol is most likely the user of that system. And the folder inside this folder is most likely the desktop folder along with other folders like your download folders, your video folders, and the likes. But immediately after this name is I can access my desktop folder. So that is what I'm going to do. So I'll come back here to the code and I'll start from the C drive. Say C colon. You can either use forward slash or you can use backslash, so it doesn't really matter. Now, the reason why we're doing this, now in Python we have backslash n, we have backslash t. Now, if you put one backslash, as you can see in my PowerShell, I have a single backslash. We cannot use a single backslash to access the path of a file because Python will think that you are trying to type backslash n or backslash t. You are trying to escape something. So in order to override that assumption from the Python interpreter, you have to add an extra backslash. So I'll just come here and say user. So based on what I have, users double backslash user. So user double backslash desktop. The desktop, no. So I'm going to download rather, not desktop rather. So downloads. Then after that, I'll say bank. So bank.png. So you can see that it's already accessing the file already. Now, after I have done this, because I'm actually trying to change the icon photo on my window screen, I'll have to call the window screen, which is my TK class, and it has a function called icon photo inside. Now, it's this function that we're going to use to replace that leaf icon on our window screen. So I'll just come here and say photo. Before you pass photo, you have to say false. So it's something we just do. You pass the false parameter, then you pass your photo. And that is it. Voila. it will replace the the leaf image on my window screen with this bank icon I downloaded. So you can actually download PNG images from this site. So there's a site called www.icon icon-icons.com. So this is where I get most of my images, my PNGs from. I'll just comment that out so you can get your image from there. So that's where I downloaded this bank image that I'm about to use to replace my leaf icon. So just run your code and you'll discover that the leaf icon has been changed to another icon. So this was the bank icon I downloaded. So that's how you can change the icon of your graphical user interface using tkinter. All right, so that brings us to the end of the episode for today. And this actually brings us to the end of the basics of the Python programming language with the tkinter model. So in my subsequent videos, I'm going to work on projects. So I'm going to work on projects, creating a calculator, and then redoing a banking project. But this time around, I'm going to add the back end to it. I'm going to use PostgreSQL, which is an RDBMS, a relational database management system to handle user information such as the person's name, their account balance, their login. So we're going to upgrade that banking project again. And I'm going to add dialog boxes so that in case the user tries to withdraw and the amount is not up to the amount he's trying to withdraw, there will be a message that will pop up. Or so we're going to modify that banking project in later tutorials. But we're done with every single thing we need to know for the basics of the Python programming language. So if you like my video, or if you are liking this video so far, or what I have been doing all this while till this point, please hit that like button. And if you feel like this tutorial will be of importance to someone, that is a friend or a family, please share. And if you want to encourage me to continue to create more content like this, please hit that subscribe button. So till we meet again, it's goodbye for now.